Hello and welcome to my inherited skill guide. In this guide, I'm going to be covering the emblem Marth. In these guides, I'm going to be breaking down all of their passives and going over how they can be used and when you can use them in regards to availability and builds. So let's jump into it. So first we have Perceptive. So Perceptive is something you can get early. Grants Avoid plus 15 during combat if you initiate. It also scales Avoid with your speed, specifically with high speed. So this is really good for attacking. This is a very player phase oriented ability. It is quite cheap, so if you want to run it on a unit who has trouble gaining SP, this can be a decent option. Personally, I've used this on my first Maddening run, and I haven't used it since because it doesn't work on enemy phase, and as you enter the mid and late game, enemy phase tanking becomes more valuable than player phase tanking. So being able to safely survive during enemy onslaught seems more useful, but this does have a use case. It's not bad. It does allow you to attack things without taking damage, which could be the difference between surviving or not. So it's not horrible. There is an upgraded version of it. So Perceptive Plus gives you Avoid plus 30. So essentially, if you're fast, just this alone will allow you to essentially dodge tank when you attack, which is useful. And there is a situation where you could run this, especially on a unit with like Sigurd, so you could kind of get in, hit something, maybe kill it, dodge its incoming attacks, and then get out. There are obviously better things though for just straight up avoid tanking, but it's not bad, and it's quite cheap too. The only downside to it though is getting Perceptive Plus will require you to be very, very late game, so you can go the entire playthrough just on baseline Perceptive, and then near the end of the game, for the final few chapters, you'll finally be able to get Perceptive Plus after beating Marth's Paralog, so definitely questionable. There's certainly better things. Alright, so Avoid plus 10. So this is like the Avoid plus line, so you have Avoid plus 10 all the way up to 30. Now, the highest you can go before Marth's Paralog is Avoid plus 20 for 2.5k SP. I have unlocked this before on Alir, and what you basically need to do is have a unit on Emblem Ring and use the well as soon as possible and as often as possible, getting 3 to 4 stars per well use, and essentially it does exactly what you think it does. It helps you be an avoid tank. So if you stack this with an engraving and a fast unit, you're looking at tons of damage mitigated just from being fast. So this is really good on any unit that you want to be enemy phase ready for. It also scales well, so once you get to the late game and get Marth again and then beat his Paralog, you can get Avoid plus 30. Now you're going to be spending a lot of SP to get this, but you can easily hit broken avoid rates on this on most classes, especially on Alir. So it can be pretty good, pretty overpowered. It can literally break the game if you get your avoid so high enemies can't hit you. So that's something to consider. Now with the well, Avoid plus 30 is attainable. I was able to easily get Avoid plus 20 before chapter 10. On my 6th or 7th run, so pretty useful, and that's for Maddening, of course. Okay, so let's go over Sword Agility. So this one's kind of weird. It's basically like a cheaper version of Avoid, but it only applies when using a sword. So it scales all the way up to plus 30 Avoid, and the crit minus 10 remains consistent. Now the only difference between the two is it's 500 SP cheaper. Honestly, I don't think it's worth getting. I think just straight up Avoid is better. Most classes run multiple weapons, so if you're on Sword, Axe, or Sword, Lance, Wyvern, and you switch to a Lance and you lose all your Avoid and you're expecting to have Avoid, that could be bad. So I don't recommend getting it. I don't think it's that useful. Break Defenses. This one is actually really good, and you can get this early too. And with the well, you can unlock this on a few units, maybe like 2 to 3 before chapter 10. So really only early units will get this. Now, breaking is best when you have multiple weapon types, right? When you have 2 to 3 weapon types. The only units that have 3 weapon types, usually the third one is staff, so it's not like it's a weapon. However, most classes, most of the good classes at least, have 2 weapon types. So being able to break and then get extra damage off is huge. And you also have to consider that if you have like a brave weapon, so like let's say I'm using a brave sword and I break an enemy, I get a 50% brave follow-up. So if you're running like Chimera, Now obviously Chimera can't get this early, but this is just an example. If you're running like Chimera or Alchrist or someone who can break, now Alchrist, bows breaking something isn't a thing unfortunately, but I guess Saline could make good use of this because she has tomes which don't break, and then she has swords. So if she breaks an axe with her Levin sword, she would just get extra follow-ups. But on Alir, for like a brave sword, you could get a brave effect. But the extra attack is nice. It can also trigger crits. So however your normal attacks function, whether it be crits, brave, or high damage, it will give you the extra effects of that attack but have the damage. So the final skill, Unyielding, heals you when your health is below a threshold. So if your HP is 20% or less, restores 20% of the unit's max HP. Now this is the only rank you can get before very late game. If you could get this earlier, it might be a little bit better, but even so, the effect isn't really that useful. So you can see that it scales by 10% per rank, and it caps out at Unyielding++, restoring 40% of your max HP if you're below 40%. Now Unyielding++ is definitely the best one, just because, you know, it scales, gives you the most health, has a more easy, it has an easier trigger. Being below 40% is way easier than being below 20%. Being below 20%, you're probably skirting the edge of death there, and also you don't want to get that low. Whereas if you're at like 20 or 30% max HP, this will trigger and heal you. Now, is this good for late game? Definitely not. Is this good for early to mid game? Definitely not. It is cheap, so even though it's not that useful, it's still really cheap, so if you want to run it, you can. But if you want to play on maddening mode, this is not going to be helping you. You're better off just going for dodge tanking. It is very cheap though, so it's definitely the worst of all of these abilities in my opinion. It's nice to have for free when you equip Emblem Marth, but aside from that, I don't recommend running it ever. So the main ones that are good, I would say, are Avoid and Break Defense. And Perceptive can be okay situationally, and Sword Agility, I just don't see the advantage of it. So that's pretty much it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. Feel free to drop a comment as to how you use any of these abilities. I'm going to cover each of the emblems, including the DLC. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next one.